Tall Tales. The Nymph Symphony.
Chapters.
Chapter 11. The Feast. I abandoned my duties and went straight home, burying my head under the pillow of my hammock bed, hoping to escape what had just happened. I only got a moment's relief before the news spread to the servants' quarters. Just after my own arrival, the staff running around in a fluster, now having to prepare dinner celebration for the prince and his fiancée with barely a moment's notice. It was another bloody banquet I was going to have to work at. For the first time in my life, I wished I was on rubbish duty, just so I could avoid watching and serving Arlo and Ebony at the dinner table. I put on the same sticky and stained apron I'd been wearing this morning, covered with smudges of grime and filth, as I began heading to the dining room. I passed Arlo and Ebony on the way to the dinner table, trying to keep them oblivious towards my own insufferable heartache. I was frequently turning my back and making every noticeable attempt to avoid the two of them catching sight of me. Dusk was just settling as the dinner was hastily served. "My apologies that the king could not be with us this evening," Milena told Ebony's parents. "For last-minute repairs were required on the sphere," she politely explained just before Jade, I, and a few other servants came to the table with dishes, waiting to serve the hors d'oeuvres. Milena gave a small finger flick, and we placed the dishes on the long dining table. The finest hors d'oeuvres we could improvise, giving the short notice. Dried lily pad petals coated in sugarcane toffee as a quick but effective sweet delicacy, only to have prime saffron strings plucked and grinded with sunflower seeds in order to make the bread for the main meal, accompanied by a few various spreads of crushed nuts, made into varying assortments of sauces or spices for the mushroom stews and mountain bread tips we had slaved over making. "It seems he is never able to get away from that machine anymore," the doctor remarked. "How bothersome for you and your family." "Yes, it must be taxing having to always put the kingdom before family," his wife, Judge Delphi, then added as she thanked me for handing her an extra side plate to put things on, the crisp, clean frock of her long-sleeve white dress hardly interfering with her ability to put hot and staining food down upon it. The awkwardness of a gypsy-looking lady who, despite her clear judicial profession, was not accustomed to fancy wear like her beautiful but tipsy daughter, had become over time. Ebony sat silent and embarrassed to all conversation transpiring around them, unsure of what exactly to risk even saying. Best of friends before it all, it was amazing how one little gesture can change so much and turn her and Arlo so suddenly into strangers. "Now, boy, there's a story I have been anxiously waiting for you to tell," the doctor then said to his nervous future son-in-law. Arlo and I both staring blankly at each other as we tried to gather what exactly the doctor meant by that statement. "Story?" he timidly reiterated. "That sword," the doctor then had to clarify, pointing to the corner where Arlo had put his new sword down, still too in love with it to put it away. "Ah, the sword. Well, after I lost my own, he pointed to me, "found this one in the abandoned farmhouse," he said as I handed him an extra plate too for adding unwanted food on. "And the fact that farmhouse was lined with gold has no relevance to your story?" the doctor joked, trying to humbly make more small talk. "Oh, yes. Well, it was... how did you know about that?" a flustered Arlo asked back. "Midas created that sword when he was only a little bit older than yourself. Destiny, he called it. It was an invention he and Helios designed that was meant to mimic the effect of Nyx statues. A proof of concept for the Sunspire's eventual creation. As a matter of fact, although at the time, he only really did this because he believed he could use it to ward off the single most evil creature that had ever..." Delphi elbowed him in the side. "Maxwell," she admonished, "that is not an appropriate story for this occasion." The rediscovery of Midas must have shaken up many nobles, as they seemed afraid to even speak his name. It was almost as if they believed talking about the former king would breathe life back into his reign, which was a real letdown, as every adolescent servant and guest in that room was staring at the doctor quietly, intrigued as we waited for him to finish his fascinating story. "They never do grow up," Milena said, directing her comment at Delphi. Getting ready to take my leave from this long dining hall table, I placed my second-last plate by Anara, who was sitting at the table's left corner, stopping briefly as she placed her hand on mine sympathetically, her eyes beaming into mine, trying to study, if not diagnose, the severity of my own bleeding soul. In every room, at every moment, no one's sadness ever got past her. As young as she was always the most aware of her environment. "Kaya, you should sit with us," Anara suddenly said, knowing how rude Milena would appear to the others if she refused. "Yes, join us," the doctor invited. "It's time we apologize to you about all that unpleasantness that happened the other day," he added, referring to his daughter's actions in the pit when she beat me up. "And I would like to hear your first-hand account of what happened yesterday," Maxwell said, pointing his hand at the empty chair to the left of him. I looked up with the last dish left, Ebony the only guest without a plate. A plate I would take from her if I was to sit down. "Oh, Kaya, would you be a dear and grab some more bread as well, please?" Milena then sweetly directed me, cleverly ushering me to refuse the request without having to sound impolite by saying it out loud. I bowed my head at her before placing the last plate by Ebony and quickly made my exit. I walked back to the kitchen across the hall and over to the counter to grab the bread. "Let me get that for you," Arlo said, having followed me. I raised him to open the side cabinet drawers and bent down to pick up one small basket from the pile in the pantry. "I wouldn't want you to hurt your knees anymore," I said with a harsh snap, snatching one out as quickly as I could. "My knees?" Arlo asked, confused. "From having to kneel twice in one day," I rudely sniped, handing it to him almost aggressively, and speaking loud enough to be overheard by the whole table in the other room as they stared at us, all of them silent and listening for the prince's response. "Well, they're not," he said calmly, looking slightly remorseful even as he took the bread back to the table, perhaps more aware of my own dilemma than I had initially thought. "Try doing it every day of your life then," I angrily whispered back to him before storming off through the kitchen's exit.